Waltraud here from the Black Chair. Today we have got Roxanne with us. She works in film, yoga, defines herself as a woman, and she likes traveling. She doesn't like labels. There we go. Let's meet her.
Hi, Waltraud.
Hi, Roxanne. And how are you feeling today? And tell us about the labels or the dislike of labels you have got.
I guess I used to be very obsessed with labels. I guess because I was learning a lot about them. Like, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a feminist? What does it mean to be a part of the LGBT community? And I really didn't, as a teenager, it was all very overwhelming, all these labels, and I thought I needed one. And then I kind of grew into myself and realized, I don't know, defining myself kind of put me into a box that I didn't really need to be put in or need to put myself in. Because I think the only label that really defines me is that I'm a human being, like a lot of other people on this planet. And I think that's really all that I am. That's the only label that I can see, is that I'm a human being. Everything else is just nature.
Yeah. I hear you, and I hear that this very much in today's language, in the generation coming up, your generation. Also in my daughter and in the friends of my daughter.
Yeah.
And I must say, I am scared sometimes, and I'm aware of my fear around choosing the wrong label, making a mistake by labeling, because it's a language which has come in, which is not been part of my upbringing, and I'm from a generation of where it's very defined who is a man and who is a woman, and then there's the weird ones, and that's very much as running in as a tape in the background. And even so, I have a different way of holding this and thinking about it these days, and very much making a practice of using the way the LGBT community, non-binary, is wanting to live life, but nevertheless, it doesn't come natural to me.
Yeah, well, I don't think it comes natural to a lot of people, because especially in Western culture, we've been brought up with, you know, these kind of gender stereotypes that are deep rooted in our society. And I guess I'm in the generation or something that has come up with these labels, but I make mistakes with pronouns and stuff like that, but it's okay to make mistakes as long as you try and educate yourself on them as well. Like, sometimes you'll never know when to call someone a they or a them unless they specifically ask you. And I don't necessarily understand why people can sometimes get upset when somebody doesn't know their pronoun when they don't know them, because obviously you have to ask before you know. That's how, you know, knowledge works. You don't know everything from the beginning. You have to be told and taught.
So that's an interesting point you're making, Roxanne. From having you in front of me as a young person in her early 20s, is there a protocol, etiquette around which one me could have taken? Would it have been the appropriate way, or the kind way, or the caring way to say, Roxanne, so because our viewers obviously noticed I introduced you only with one name. That was your prerogative. You didn't want to use another name. I asked you, how do you want to be introduced? You said Roxanne. Would the question also have to be needed to, and what are your pronouns? Is that for me to ask, or for you to tell me? And what do we mean by that? just for
Yeah.
our viewers, that would be very nice if you could sort of speak a little bit to that.
Okay, sure. The thing is, I feel like I can't speak for anyone except for myself.
No, true.
I can't speak for the broader community. But if hypothetically, if it was me, and somebody used, I identify as she, her. Like I don't really even think about pronouns, to be honest. But I think about she, her as to myself. But if they weren't she, her, I feel like that would be on me to tell other people, like, oh, I don't identify as she, her. If you could call me they, them, or he, him, that would be great. But then again, I don't know. I can only speak for me, and I've only ever identified as a woman and as non-binary as well. So occasionally I did prefer they, them, but I don't think that I would ever expect somebody to know that off the bat if they didn't already know me. But I guess the polite thing now these days is, if you don't know, the best thing would probably be to ask, like, oh, what pronouns do you use? So I can call you them. That's probably, I guess, what you could call a protocol, is just asking up front, like, oh, what pronouns do you use?
Which we, in a way, in the very conservative, old-fashioned way, also have. The Mr., the Mrs., the Ms., and the Miss.
Yeah.
So it's really no different. And
No.
and what's different is the practice. What's different is the finding out and being interested and curious around what that could mean and how to do it. And I must say, if it wasn't for my daughter, who I constantly give thanks to for bringing all this newness into my life, what is going on in society, it would be very easy to stay in my bubble where you are not confronted, because that's my bubble I live in. You have your friends, and it broadens my horizon immensely and stretches it in ways which are very uncomfortable at times, because it is.
Sorry, change isn't meant to be comfortable, though, is it?
Well,
that's the whole, process of change.
Process of change most definitely brings a lot of, or can bring a lot of discomfort with it. And it's an interesting paradigm. Is it that it is always uncomfortable, or is it how we look at change, how we are willing is to change or bring resistance to it? Because I know you have had a lot of changes in your life.
Yeah.
The little bit I know you and you have told me about. And as you know, this is very much about mental health and creativity, this talk.
Yeah.
You are a creative person because you work in film and in media, and you have used those practices in your change. Can you say more about that?
When you say change, like how I use my creativity for change, or?
No, I mean it more changing how you felt about yourself, as a matter of fact, because you, as a teenager, and I don't know if this is overstepping a mark to say that, but as a teenager, you struggled quite a bit with self-worth and.
Yeah, it's a journey. I think I'm still on it. I think there's a whole lot more self-love that I can learn, and I think every day is a journey, especially when it comes to mental health. But I definitely used my writing as a big outlet for, I guess, coping with that sort of, like, because I suffered a lot with depression and anxiety. I still do. I still have those anxieties when I go out and meet friends, and when a big life decision's coming up. But a big boundary of that I had to cross was just jumping into it and not really letting myself overthink. And I think with a creative brain, it's really easy to overthink about those sort of things, like making a decision or going a certain path, because career-wise it can be quite unstable, especially in film. Not a lot of people make it in film, so you really have to dedicate yourself to your industry. And the thing is that I was really struggling in high school, keeping up with homework and studies and school and all that, and I decided to drop out and move to Sydney all of a sudden. Living in Melbourne, I decided to move to Sydney to go to university because I dedicated myself to my film.
When you say dropping out, you didn't drop out very early. You struggled pretty much almost to the end. It was sort of in the last year. You chose not to finish the last.
I dropped out at the end of term 1 of year 12.
Yes.
So the last year of high school.
Yes. And you chose to embark onto filmmaking and learning about that. And when you just said about your creative brain made it difficult, or it is quite difficult for the creative brain, in which way do you find the creative brain is interfering, has interfered, and you are aware of now in your life?
Well,
what's it doing? Do you see lots of pictures, like lots of possibilities, have this lateral way of thinking? Is what you mean by creative brain?
Well, I think because I'm always making up stories, what I used to do was always jump straight to the worst case scenario that I could possibly think of, which would always stop me.
Catastrophizing, rather, like what the worst thing which could happen is.
Pretty much, yeah.
We've got emails dropping in. I think people are writing to us of how much they love what we're doing here.
Definitely, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. So you jump to the
worst case scenario, really. Yeah.
Right. And what do you do with that?
Well,
when that happens,
I think it kind of fuels my art, to be honest.
It fuels your art.
Yeah. I think that's the great thing, is you can take mental health one way. You could see it as a burden and you can like drop down into it and feel terrible about yourself and think, like, woe is me. Or you can take that pain and kind of mush it up and sculpt it into this piece of art and think like, oh, thank you so much for this sadness, because this sadness will bring me a new perspective on this situation. Or like, oh, thank you so much for this fear. I didn't think about it that way. Maybe we can like funnel that into, because I mean, everybody gets sad, everybody's scared, everybody doesn't feel like, nobody feels happy all the time. And if you feel happy all the time, there's probably something wrong with you. Like everybody feels sad. That's just like a part of life. It's just, I guess, how you deal with that sadness and what you can create from it. But I do think creative people, or people who may think more creatively or use the left side of their brain more often, do tend to fall into ruts, because that side of your brain isn't very logical. That's the right side. This is the mathematics and science, and this is the, finger painting and jumping in puddles. It's not very logical, because emotions don't necessarily always tend to be logical, but we still feel them, and that's okay. And I think that's what I really struggled with, is like, why am I so sad? And that's like, and that kind of put me into like this devil's cycle of thinking, I'm sad. Why am I sad? Now I'm sad because I don't know why I'm sad. And then I get sadder, and it's like, yeah, if you just accept that you're sad, you can take that and turn it into something beautiful, like a poem.
But what was the process? Because that doesn't just happen from one moment to the next.
No.
It sounds very wonderful, but there's a process one goes through, and it's kind of those waves we ride, the highs and the lows, and so there's work to be done.
Oh yeah.
And you did the work. and you're doing the work. So
Yeah.
what did that look like?
Geez, I mean, it's been a long journey. I feel like I started my mental health journey when I was about 12 years old, when I first went to the therapist at like my primary school or something. And definitely during my teenage years, it didn't feel like I could come out of that. But I was still going to therapy. I was still working on myself. But I also feel like as you get older, you kind of experience more things in life and see the world in different ways. And you grow a sort of emotional maturity as you grow up. Because as a 12-year-old, you don't understand why the world is the way it is.
So what helped you at the time? Who and what were your anchors? What did you go to?
I mean, the biggest anchor...
The therapist, of course, was...
Therapist, but I think the biggest anchor in my life that's just been a constant was my mum. And she constantly reminded me, like, life is going to be tough, but you just have to get through it. And she was there no matter what. Like, if I was crying my eyes out, she'd be holding my hand until I wasn't crying my eyes out anymore. And it made me feel like I wasn't alone. And it made me realize how lucky I was to have that sort of anchor in my life, because I know a lot of people don't have that. And that's also a part of emotional maturity, is realizing, oh wow, I actually am super lucky to have this support network around me, with like my therapist, my mum, my friends. Like,
well, that's one part, Roxanne. But
yeah.
Most of us have, all of us have a mother.
Yeah.
Many of us have got them in our lives. Some don't.
Yeah.
But having a mother doesn't necessarily mean as a mother you are doing the right thing. And I can speak to that, because I am a mother to a daughter who is older than you. And it is, a mother has a role of being with someone. So I'm curious, what qualities does a mother need or is supportive to actually be helpful to the 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 18-year-old who struggles?
Jeez. What roles should a mother have?
I mean,
I don't know. I think it's just...
What worked for you? Like the fact that you're saying she was sitting there holding your hand, to me that sounds an incredible woman, to be able to just sit there and hold your hand and let you cry. It's kind of, it says non-judgment, or I'm here.
Just, honestly, just, I'm here. Feel the way you're feeling. And I mean, my mum and I had our ups and downs as well. I wasn't very easy to deal with.
Welcome to the human
race.
Like,
I don't think that she handled everything perfectly. I definitely didn't handle everything perfectly.
So your mum is not perfect?
No, nobody's perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. It's a concept of, you know, like, there is no such thing as perfection. But the reason why I love my mother is because of her flaws. That's what makes us interesting as human beings, is our flaws. Perfections are really just a mask that we put on so that we can present ourselves in a certain way. But everybody has their own flaws. And I think the reason why my mum was such an anchor for me is just because she tried. Like, she just tried to help me. She didn't understand what was going on. Neither did I.
You didn't understand.
Like,
it's very hard to understand.
Yeah. And I just, looking back on it, she was just there. She was just as understanding as she could be. And I don't know, just, she was just amazing. She was so non-judgmental, and she was so supportive, and
sounds like she didn't give up on you.
That's she was I feel like she was the one person that didn't. And I think that's what really got me through those hard times.
So there's your therapist, your mom, and how did the creativity help you with dealing with those demons at the time? Getting to know them, because that's really what you started getting to know something about yourself.
Yeah. I think at first creativity was just an outlet.
Which one? Writing?
Writing,
Anything else?
making movies, like making videos, drawing. Not that I'm any good at it, but I think everybody should draw anyway. I don't know. Yeah, mostly writing, and then it kind of became a distraction, because if I could keep myself busy, then I wouldn't deal with my emotions. I could focus entirely on my work and not actually cope with any, like, it was kind of like a door that I didn't want to open, and I was using film as an outlet. It's like, if I just put everything into this, that maybe will go away.
So are you saying you parked the mental health? Am I understanding right that you sort of did you use creativity and filmmaking because you knew that was helpful, or did you use it in order to distract yourself?
I think I think it was a mixture of both. It was a distraction as well as coping.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really coping either. I was kind of ignoring and purely focusing on film. And this was like in my late teens, early late.
You know, that is a big deal, Roxanne, because if you look back those years, to drop out of school, which is, you know, you weren't quite 18, you were really struggling with life situations in your life, with family life, and which put you into this, sort of added to the way you felt. Then leaving home, going to Sydney, which is a big deal, setting up household, fending for yourself for the first time. You know, you never.
That was a big learning experience.
That
as
in
well.
itself. So, and when we look at mental health and the stresses which depression bring, is divorces, marriages, death, moving house. So in a way,
I love moving. I think it's so, because you throw so much out. Like, it's like all of a sudden you look back at all these memories that you've had of this. I moved so often in Sydney because I was moving from one place to another, so it kind of became a routine. I never really stay anywhere anymore. I'm always on the run.
It sounds though you did pretty well with those stresses you had, and the focusing in learning filmmaking was actually a saving grace. Not necessarily sort of parking, not looking at it, avoiding it. It seems like it was a smart move of, in order for me to cope, this is what I need to do right now. So you did cope.
But it also made me grow up really quickly, because like I didn't know how to cook or wash my washing or clean. Like my mum pretty much did everything for me. And I remember on the first night in Sydney, I tried to cook pasta, just like in water, and I didn't know what to do. So I called up my mum, and she's like, okay, put water in a pot, turn on the stove, put the pasta in, wait like 7 minutes, and then take the pasta out. And that was very stressful for me because I'd never made pasta before on my own. And somehow I managed to burn the pasta because I didn't put enough water in, so it was all just stuck to the bottom.
She didn't say stir it and add a drop of oil.
Well, to be fair, I think I don't know what she was thinking, but I would have been laughing at me because now that I know how to cook pasta, I don't know, as an 18-year-old, you should know how to cook pasta, I think.
Well, should you?
I think so. Yeah. It's kind of like the, bare minimum of cooking, isn't it? But anyway, it made me grow up because then I realized, like, I actually have to learn how to survive now, because I was very much in my head. And now that I was out of home, I was like, I actually have to be an adult and pay taxes. That was a thing that I didn't realize.
The choice of growing up.
Well, it wasn't really a choice. I had to.
Joy.
Oh, the joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was definitely, I think it's what made me realize. I was like, oh, rent's a thing. I didn't know that. What are bills? Who pays that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that made me grow up really quickly.
And we all feel we want to move out and we want to be independent and we're going to do so much better than our parents did. And there's so much which unfolds in front of us.
Yeah.
And that is you speaking from a pastor place. And here I am in my age, there's unfolding for me how to speak to a language which has so far not been in my life. So I'm not sure if we can say I should know how to cook pasta. It's the same as somebody says to me I should know all the lingo.
That's true.
It's a new thing.
Yeah.
And somehow I feel we might be a little bit hard on ourselves either way, of being very quickly condemning what we don't know. I mean, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. But I think that's why life is a learning experience. Like, I try every single day. Like, I know I've had a good day if I've learned something new, because there's unlimited information in this world. And as long as we keep on learning, we keep growing, and that's how we can become a better, or how we can make a better place, is just educating ourselves on other people's experiences. Like, look at what's happening in the world today. If we just keep on educating ourselves and actually look at things from a different perspective, we might not get stuck at these crossroads and
that's an interesting
battle each other.
Yeah, that's an interesting paradigm you're just raising up for me, which makes me think of, we are here two white women speaking to each other.
Yeah.
And the big theme at the moment is Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And I have I do not want to speak about to that, because I from a perspective of the black community, because I don't think this is my place. I feel though what we do need to speak to is to our whiteness.
Yeah.
And how does it impact the education, and what is my part as a woman, as I sit here, to bring up about whiteness and what it means, and the white supremacy which plays into very much the unrests which have flared up. And I feel, and I would like to acknowledge here, for everybody to hear, that I feel like a very privileged white woman in a Western world. And by privileged, I do not for a second feel privileged financially or privileged in what I have come to in life and what I have created and what opportunities I had. I've purely privileged because I have been born white in Austria to the parents I was born to, even so they were very, I would call, poor and not very terribly educated. I am privileged just because I'm white. A little bit not so privileged because I'm a woman in a man's world, but nevertheless.
Working on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is my part in educating myself?
Yeah.
What that means?
Well, I think that there's a lot of people out there who don't actually acknowledge their white privilege. And I think that's a serious issue.
What does white privilege mean to you, Roxanne?
Like for myself or like the wider community?
Well, whatever, because I think that there's also confusion around what white privilege means, just as there's confusion around what the pronouns mean and how to use them.
Okay. Well, okay, white privilege is really just where we are today, how, I don't know how to define it. I mean, I'm privileged as, like, I acknowledge my white privilege because I realised that I was born in Australia to a white family, And that has, unbeknownst to me originally, made my life easier in certain ways. Because, for example, when I call the police, I don't feel that like my life is in danger. When I call the police, I think, oh, okay, I'm calling the police to come help me with a certain situation. Whereas I understand, or that I've been informed now, that that's not the same for Black people and Indigenous people, who, when they call the police, when they've got an issue, they feel like they can't trust the police because there are so many cases in Australia, in America, all over the world, in the UK, where there are these prejudices built on, I mean, look where the police come from. It's built off white supremacy. Police were instated to control, like, slaves coming in from the boats. I mean, it's rooted in our society, from like where the police have this position of power over the Black man, because the Black community, even we only said sorry to the Aboriginals in 1991 for everything that we've done. And what does sorry do? Like, sorry's a nice, like, statement. Obviously, we should apologize.
A 5-letter word.
Yeah, a 5-letter word for hundreds of years of massacres, mistreatment, killed men, raped women, children being taken away, land being stolen. How are we supposed to make up for that with an apology? And people are saying like, oh yeah, but we're giving back to the Aboriginal communities and they get so much from the government. But if you really actually look at what they get and what they experience on a day-to-day basis in terms of prejudices, I mean, look at the average Australian. I have people in my family saying like, oh, but they're lazy, look at them, they're getting all this sort of stuff, and what are they doing with it? Whereas us, the white man, brought our culture to this land, stole this land off them, and have poisoned them with alcohol and drugs. And we expect them to pick themselves up when we actually need to be doubling down on supporting them and making sure that they don't lose their traditions and making sure that they do get what they need. And in terms of like financial support as well, we can say that we support them when there's a great video I saw that I wish I could show you of how it kind of like looks at us saying like, oh, look what the Aboriginals are getting, but really what I can't speak on it because I'm not educated enough. And I'm trying to educate myself every single day, and that's what we need to do.
Okay, so you are saying that it is up to us to educate and not expect a person of color, whatever color that may be, whatever race that may be, to educate us about what their problem is.
Because that's not their problem.
Because it's not a problem.
No, it's not their problem.
That's right.
We have the, what's the word? Not an opportunity. We have the need. We have the responsibility. There we go. That's the word. We have the responsibility of educating ourselves and educating our children, because what they get taught in school isn't a lot about the Indigenous history. It's the history from the white man, and I remember that very clearly. And I feel like I've learned more about Indigenous culture over the past couple of weeks from what I've seen on my social media feed and stuff like that than I ever did in school. And I think that that's saying something.
Can I share an example with you what I feel deeply a white privilege is for me?
Yeah.
I feel I can go back and find my roots. I can go back, if I'm really digging and would be very interested in, I can go back at least 100, 200 years, maybe even more, to find my ancestors and know where I have come from, because it's recorded. Where the African Black community or also here in Australia, it would be very difficult to find the ancestors, a lineage, because if you didn't know the name of the slave owner, you couldn't find the name of your relations because they had no identity, and they were only recorded through the master of the slave. Now that is a huge privilege, that I can find out where do I come from. I can trace that back.
Yeah.
And coming from a Germanic background, born in Austria, I have grown up as a child sitting on the floor, hearing my father yelling at the television when the riots in Brixton in the 60s, there were riots flaring up, black community, Africans being beaten with bats by the police, and my father yelling at the television, they deserve it, those black bastards. Now my father was a very caring, loving, beautiful man, as I was, looking at him, adoring him.
Yeah.
But it is so ingrained. Black is bad and white is good. So here I was, this privilege of being somebody who is white. I have so many more what we could race, and it is a very complicated topic to get across, because it means I have to own it, and I have to say, me too, I am part of this. I am part of a race. No, I haven't done it. No, I haven't been part of the Holocaust. No, I haven't been part of the Aboriginal slaughtering. No, I haven't been part of the slave trade. But I am a descendant of the white race who is. That doesn't mean I feel guilty for it, but it warrants that I acknowledge that, and it needs to stop with me. And what do I do actively about that?
Yeah. I think we definitely need to hear more Indigenous people and Black people and people of different races talk about this on this sort of platform as well, because as two privileged white females coming from relatively good places, I mean, Australia is a pretty lucky place to grow up in, and I never considered, I don't know, I feel very lucky as well, because I grew up in a very multicultural place. Like Melbourne is extremely multicultural, so I always had different people around me. But then I see, so I've never really quite understood the mindset of not accepting somebody because of the color of their skin. For me, I try and understand where people come from of all different places, but I can't get into that mindset of not accepting someone because of the color of their skin. It doesn't even work in my brain. I don't even know where that comes from. But I also acknowledge that I also come from a Germanic background, and my great-grandfather was a Nazi, and I'm sure he was a great father, but to me, I just see him as a monster who was a part of a monstrous movement in the 40s. Like, I don't see him as, but then I never knew him.
But it's also, Roxanne, I'm wondering about this. This is an interesting topic you raise. You see him as a monster.
Yeah.
Now it's your great-grandfather. For me, it's my grandfather, so a generation closer.
Yeah.
And I do feel somewhat what that could maybe mean for you. I mean, we all experience it different, but my experience was for many years that I saw him as a monster. I did not want to speak about him. I didn't want to acknowledge him in my life. But it's like white privilege. There is a place he needs to have in my life. And I found a way to accept him in, find love in my heart for him, that this is who he was, I don't condone what he did. I don't even know what he did because I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And the stories I do not know about either because people refuse to talk in this generation. But now he is integrated in a way, part of my family. I have to accept that. It's like how I need to accept or have accepted that I'm part of a white race which has done wrong in the world, just as I am part of a family where some members have done wrong in the world and still do wrong in the world in smaller ways, but they do. Now I have a choice. Am I breaking the cycle and carry on however the wrong looks, or am I creating something from this and use this as a platform to educate from? So that brings me back to that point, I think, when you say black people should talk or persons of color to speak in that forum. They have spoken. They have tried years. I wonder if the time has come that white people need to talk more to each other and start getting the message across what it actually means to be white. And I'm very interested in those kind of topics now, which I raise at dinner tables, which are very often still very white in Australia. Coming from London when I lived there to Australia, I kind of went, where have I landed? You know?
I definitely felt that when I moved to the UK as well, because I didn't realize how whitewashed my community was here in Australia. Yeah, even though it's considered very multicultural, but it's still very.
Well, we are running soon out of time, so I want to bring you back to creativity and mental health. We have gone a long way, and we could circle, finding it really interesting to talk to such an age difference, because I am so grateful you said yes to actually coming, because I benefit so much from it. You have a different view, different thoughts, different language. You are approaching it in such a intelligent and you know, you're caring, you're thinking. You are not just living into the day. So I want to bring you back and see where you are at today. What are you doing now as you sit here with the writing, the deep depression, the filmmaking, and where are you at now, and how is your anxiety, and how do you handle it?
I still get waves of depression and anxiety. I mean, I'm still a very anxious person. I suffer very deeply with social anxiety, so I get very panicky when I have to be around large groups of people. But I think really what's helped me has just been pushing myself out of my comfort zone and actually going to places that make me anxious, doing things that make me fearful, and diving deeper into my sadness rather than trying to run away from it. And kind of just...
So you are saying you're staying there, you're feeling it, and you're observing it, and sort of like feeling it?
Yeah.
And then what happens? Does it sort of participate?
Well, I really delve deep into how I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling really depressed, I'm going to I'm going to make myself super depressed.
You're going to make yourself.
I'm going to put on super sad music. I'm going to watch a video that's going to make me cry, and then I'm going to write a sad poem. And I'm just going to dive to the deepest point of my depression and let myself just be there. And then usually it just floats away.
Okay.
Because if I actually allow myself to dive deep into it rather than running away from it and ignoring it and saying, oh, this is a bad feeling, I shouldn't be feeling this. It's like, no, it's just a part of my chemistry.
So the way I would call that, when when it happens to me,
Yeah.
when I have waves, which
Yeah.
are not as intensive anymore as they used to be as a young creative, and I've been a creative all my life.
Yeah.
And now when it raises its head, which also anxiety and in public, the last time it happened, I was at the National Gallery in Melbourne and I actually had a panic attack in the Van Gogh exhibition. And what I can do now is immediately breathe. It's this
Yeah.
breath.
Yeah.
And I breathe deep
Yeah.
into it and stay with it and
Yeah.
watch it.
Yeah.
And you are saying you are going deep, so it sounds like we are doing
Yeah.
similar things,
Well,
but in a and then it floats away.
yeah. I also feel like I've really gotten a hold on it since I've dedicated myself to yoga, because it is that is
It's
what
the
you're
breath.
saying. It's the breath.
Right.
Just that deep breathing and that deep connection to yourself. Like, as soon as I started doing yoga, I was so grounded, because I was like, oh wow, this is what breathing feels like. I don't have to be so anxious, and I can just I can breathe with the movement of my body and just kind of go inward and let the world melt away. And that's really also what really helped me as well, with like, especially with anxiety, just like going into downward dog and just taking 5 deep breaths. It's like hitting the reset button.
So how about we take a deep breath together and hit the reset button for next week?
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Roxanne.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was a joy.
It was.
And that's it.